For months, the entire tech world has been echoing the exact same complaints. Apple's first foldable phone is finally arriving this fall, targeting a September 2026 release, and the internet is completely losing its mind over a price tag that sits at $2,000. Everyone is hyperfixated on the specs that are missing, the features that got cut, and the incredibly limited color palette. People are already writing this phone off as a ridiculously expensive experiment. But while everyone was busy arguing over spec sheets and price leaks, they entirely missed the point. There are details buried deep within the latest supply chain leaks that are infinitely more interesting than any camera layout or charging speed. These are the details about what Apple has quietly spent the last several years obsessing over, hiding behind closed doors while companies like Samsung and Google rush their foldables to market. Today, we are going to dive into the absolute masterclass of internal engineering that Apple is about to drop, because the iPhone Ultra isn't just another phone that folds in half. It is a complete reinvention of how a smartphone is built from the inside out. On May 6th, a highly accurate and historically well-sourced leaker on Weibo known as Instant Digital dropped a piece of information that flew completely under the radar for most mainstream tech outlets. They made a claim that doesn't sound very sexy on the surface, but when you actually understand what it means, it changes everything. They claim that the iPhone Ultra will be the easiest foldable phone in the entire industry to disassemble and repair. Now, I know what you are thinking. Repairability isn't exactly a flashy marketing term. But think about the reality of the foldable smartphone market today. Every single foldable phone that exists right now is an absolute nightmare when it comes to repair and longevity. They are fragile, complicated labyrinths of engineering. You have delicate ribbon cables running dangerously across the folding hinge, internal components crammed into whatever millimeter of empty space the engineers could find, and absolutely no logical structure inside the chassis. If you drop a standard folding phone today and crack that inner display, or if a piece of dust gets into the hinge mechanism, you are looking at hundreds upon hundreds of dollars just to get a technician to open it properly without destroying it further. It is a terrifying out-of-warranty experience. Apple reportedly looked at this landscape and decided to redesign the entire concept of a folding phone from absolute scratch. According to the leaks, the internal layout of the iPhone Ultra is being described in the supply chain as logical yet elegant. It features a truly modular stack design. This means that instead of a chaotic web of wires, the components sit in a perfectly clean, sequential order. There are 0 cables crossing the folding hinge. There are no delicate ribbons pulling against each other every time you open and close the device. Instant Digital was so confident in this information that they explicitly stated, when the real machine is released and disassembled, everyone will understand how hard these spoilers are. That is a leaker directly telling the tech community to hold them completely accountable when the teardown videos drop in September. For a company like Apple, a brand that historically ranked near the absolute bottom of every single third-party repairability index for over a decade, this represents a massive, tectonic shift in their design philosophy. But how did they actually achieve this? Well, there's a small detail in the leaks that is genuinely fascinating, and it proves just how obsessive Apple's hardware team has been. On every single iPhone ever made, since the very first one in 2007, the volume buttons have sat on the left side of the device. On the iPhone Ultra, they are moving to the top edge. This is not an accident. It is not just a random aesthetic design choice to make the phone look different. It is a brilliant engineering decision tied directly to that new internal layout. Because the motherboard of the Ultra sits entirely on the right half of the device, Apple needed to figure out a way to route the connection cables for the volume buttons without running them across that central screen hinge. Their solution was brilliantly simple but required a total rethink of the phone's exterior. They moved the buttons upward. By doing this, they can run the cables straight up through the top of the right half of the device, keeping them entirely isolated and completely away from the fold. It is a tiny millimeter-sized detail, but it reveals exactly how much thought went into physically protecting the most vulnerable part of this phone. And this modular, highly optimized internal design didn't just buy them durability. It bought them space. And we now know exactly what Apple did with that extra internal volume. they filled it with battery. The iPhone Ultra is currently rumored to carry a massive 5,500 mAh battery. To put that into perspective, that is the largest battery ever put into any iPhone in history by a very significant margin. The upcoming standard iPhone 17 Pro Max only sits at around 5,000. But it gets better, because sitting right next to that gargantuan battery is Apple's brand new A20 Pro chip. This is Apple's very first 2nm processor, a chip designed for unprecedented power efficiency. When you combine the largest battery in iPhone history with the most efficient silicon Apple has ever produced, the iPhone Ultra could deliver multi-day endurance that no other flagship phone on the market has ever come close to touching. Add in the fact that the display crease is reportedly nearly invisible, a visual hurdle that literally no competitor has fully managed to overcome, and you start to see the real vision here. The inside of this phone was not designed around giving you the maximum number of flashy features. It was designed entirely around space, durability, and raw power. Every single component was placed with the explicit goal of protecting that folding display, maximizing the battery life, and making the whole thing actually serviceable. That is a philosophy you simply do not usually associate with Apple. Now, does all of this engineering magic mean the iPhone Ultra is going to be the perfect device for everyone? Absolutely not. To achieve this ridiculously thin, modular, and battery-heavy design, Apple is forcing you to swallow some very bitter pills. Let's talk about the compromises, because on a phone that starts at $2,000, they absolutely matter. First, there is no telephoto camera. You are paying $2,000, and you do not get a dedicated zoom lens. The standard Pro iPhone, which costs half the price, will give you 3 distinct lenses, but the Ultra leaves you with 2. Second, say goodbye to Face ID. The hardware of the foldable is reportedly way too thin to fit the complex depth mapping sensors required for facial recognition. Instead, Apple is stepping backward and replacing it with Touch ID, which will be embedded directly into the new power button. Third, there is a very high chance we are losing MagSafe. Leaked dummy units floating around the supply chain show a completely flat back with no visible magnetic charging ring, likely another casualty of the incredibly thin chassis. And if you like expressing yourself with fun colors, you are out of luck. The iPhone Ultra is launching in just 2 colors, silver and indigo. The manufacturing and production process for this new modular chassis is already so incredibly difficult that Apple simply cannot afford the logistical complexity of offering any more options. To make matters worse, right now, the supply of this device is expected to be incredibly limited. Leading supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo recently warned investors that even if Apple perfectly hits their September 2026 launch date, the vast majority of consumers will not actually be able to get their hands on one until well into 2027. These are very real, very heavy compromises. But I want you to zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. Apple has never, not once in its history, released a first-generation product that was the final, finished version of an idea. Think about it. The very first Apple Watch didn't even have an app store and relied entirely on the phone to function. The first generation of AirPods didn't have active noise cancellation or spatial audio. The absolute first iPhone didn't even have copy and paste, let alone third-party apps. But every single one of those products evolved and became something completely world-changing by their third generation. The iPhone Ultra is exactly that. It is Apple walking out onto the stage and securely planting a flag in the ground. They are saying to the industry, this is the direction we are going. This is the NE/W Ultra Premium price tier. And most importantly, this is the brand new standard for what a foldable smartphone should actually feel like to build, to repair, and to own. The crease is essentially gone. The internals are the absolute cleanest and most logical ever put into a folding chassis. The battery is the biggest they have ever shipped. A Generation 1 Apple product is almost never the reason to empty your wallet and buy, but it is always, without fail, the reason to pay very close attention. The iPhone Ultra is coming in September 2026 for $2,000. It is a masterclass in design built entirely from the inside out, setting a standard no foldable has ever set before. I will be covering every single leak, update, and confirmation on this phone the literal second it drops. So make sure you subscribe so nothing gets missed. Drop a comment below and let me know, does this massive shift in repairability and internal engineering actually change how you see this phone? Or is that $2,000 price tag still a hard no for you?